A car on this list was so dangerous, it didn't just kill its drivers, it killed the entire championship they were competing in. That story is coming, but there's also a car that showed up to one of the most prestigious races in the world with no rear wing. A car that won 15 out of 16 races and still caused a scandal. And a car that won Le Mans with an engine everyone said was physically incapable of doing it. Let's get into it. The Chaparral 2F. Imagine pulling into the Le Mans paddock in 1967 with an automatic transmission in your racing car. Seriously. Every other team is standing there with their finely tuned manual gearboxes and their very serious racing faces, and Jim Hall rolls in with something that sounds like a concept your uncle would suggest after 3 beers, except it worked. By removing the manual gearbox entirely, Hall freed his drivers to use both hands for braking and steering simultaneously, which at endurance racing speeds is a genuinely meaningful advantage that nobody else had thought to pursue. The car also ran a massive hydraulically operated rear wing the driver could adjust mid-corner, which at the time was so ahead of its thinking that rivals genuinely did not know how to respond to it. The Chaparral 2F finished second at Le Mans and won the BOAC 500 outright, an automatic gearbox, winning endurance races in 1967. And somehow, this isn't even close to the most audacious engineering decision on this list. The Jaguar XJR-9. Here is a fact that does not get nearly enough attention. The marshals standing beside the track during Le Mans 1988 wore hearing protection that was not required for any other car on the grid that year. Not the turbocharged Group C Porsches, not the screaming naturally aspirated machines, just the Jaguar. It was powered by a 7.0-liter naturally aspirated V12, producing around 750 horsepower. And at full throttle on the Mulsanne Straight, it generated a sound so extreme that people who witnessed it still struggle to describe it accurately decades later. But here's the thing nobody talks about. The noise was just the packaging. The XJR-9 won Le Mans 1988 outright, ended Porsche's stranglehold on the event, and did it with a reliability and pace that made the result look almost comfortable, a loud Jaguar casually dismantling Porsche's dynasty. Now, at the 2-minute mark, let's be honest about something. Most people think Le Mans is won on pure speed. It isn't. And the next car proves that better than almost anything else in racing history. The McLaren MP4. Most people know this car was dominant. Most people genuinely have no idea how dominant. 15 wins from 16 races in a single Formula One season. The one race it didn't win, Senna retired from the lead. Think about that for a second. The second best result the MP4 produced in 1988 was a retirement from the front. It was powered by a Honda turbocharged 1.5-liter V6, producing somewhere between 650 and 700 horsepower depending on the session. And it handled with a precision that neither Senna nor Prost had experienced before in a racing car. Here's the controversial part though. Prost won the Drivers' Championship that year, despite Senna being measurably faster across the season. The way that played out and what it did to the relationship between two of the greatest drivers who ever lived is one of the most uncomfortable stories in Formula One history. A car that was almost perfect, driven by two people who absolutely were not. And we still haven't gotten to the most insane one yet. The Nissan R390 GT1. No joke, this might be the most expensive way anyone has ever handed Porsche a victory. Nissan built the R390 GT1 for exactly one purpose: to beat Porsche at Le Mans in 1997. Not to start a racing program, not to develop road car technology, just to beat Porsche once. They developed a mid-engined GT1 prototype powered by a twin-turbocharged V8, transported everything to France, and proceeded to deliver one of the most publicly painful factory performances in endurance racing history. 3 of the 4 cars retired before the finish. The 4th came home 5th overall. Porsche won. The whole campaign cost an extraordinary amount of money and produced 5th place and some very awkward press conferences. But here's the thing most people miss. The R390 GT1 was genuinely fast in qualifying and genuinely beautiful in person. And the ambition behind building an entirely new racing car just to beat one rival at one race is a kind of madness that is honestly worth respecting. Sometimes the story is better than the result. Speaking of stories that defy logic, the next car on this list looked at every single rear wing on the Le Mans grid and decided it didn't need one.
The Peugeot 9X8. Right. So Peugeot showed up to Le Mans with no rear wing. Not a small rear wing, not a cleverly hidden rear wing. Absolutely no rear wing whatsoever on a car competing against the fastest endurance prototypes in the world. Every aerodynamicist in motorsport will tell you this is somewhere between extremely brave and completely delusional. Peugeot's argument was that their underbody aerodynamics were sophisticated enough to generate the required downforce without the drag penalty a conventional wing creates. In theory, it was the kind of lateral thinking that defines great engineering. In practice, the 9X8 was fast, but inconsistent. And Le Mans never fell its way despite genuine outright pace on certain circuits. But honestly, and this is a strong opinion, the fact that it existed at all, that a major manufacturer looked at the entire field and said no thank you to the rear wing that everyone else considered non-negotiable, is worth more than a handful of unremarkable race victories. The 6-minute mark feels like the right moment to say this clearly. The last car on this list genuinely changed everything, and it did it in a way that the sport has never fully recovered from. But first, this one needs to be talked about properly.
The Lancia Delta S4. This is the one. The Lancia Delta S4 produced 550 horsepower from a 1.8-liter engine in a car weighing under 890 kilograms, which in 1985 represented a power-to-weight ratio that had absolutely no business existing on a public road stage carved through a mountain. It used both a turbocharger and a supercharger simultaneously, the supercharger killing turbo lag at low revs while the turbo took over higher up. A system so aggressive that drivers described the power delivery not as strong, but as violent. Seriously, the word they used was violent. Henri Toivonen and his co-driver Sergio Cresto died when their S4 left the road and caught fire at the 1986 Tour de Corse. The FIA canceled Group B permanently within weeks. Not suspended, not reviewed, canceled. The Delta S4 was not banned because it broke the rules. It was banned because it broke the world it was competing in. And no rulebook had language for what to do with something that dangerous. No other car on this list carries that weight. And yet somehow, the final car on this list managed to win the biggest race in endurance racing with an engine concept that the entire industry had written off as impossible. The Mazda 787B, the only Japanese car, and the only rotary engine car to ever win Le Mans outright, 1991, against factory Porsches, Jaguars, and Mercedeses with budgets that dwarfed Mazda's entire motorsport operation. The R26B rotary engine had 4 rotors, produced around 700 horsepower, and revved to 9,000 RPM with a sound so distinctive, a high-pitched, layered scream that sounded like absolutely nothing else on the circuit. The people who stood beside the Mulsanne Straight that night still describe it as the greatest sound they had ever heard at a racing event. Mazda won not with the biggest budget or the most sophisticated aerodynamics, but with reliability, strategic patience, and an engine concept that every major manufacturer had dismissed as fundamentally unsuitable for endurance racing. They proved everyone wrong. Once, on the biggest stage the sport has. Then the regulations changed the following year to effectively exclude rotary engines from top-level competition. Of course they did, because apparently winning Le Mans wasn't enough of an argument.